You have been broken, your innocence stolen.
Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. How are you doing this morning?
I will send out an army.
Good morning. How are you doing? Good morning. It's Angela Lee this morning on the Angela Lee Show. Good morning to you this morning. How are you doing? I tell you, I'm laughing because, life stretches us, doesn't it? Join me today. It's the Angela Lee Show. And I've got an amazing show where it's our spiritual and well-being show. We're talking about should we stay or should we leave? Join me this morning. Should we stay or should we leave this morning? This is what we're talking about this morning on our well-being and spiritual show this morning. So join in the conversations this morning. Good morning. How are you doing? I'm just going to be doing my normal plug as I do. Join in the conversation this morning. Let me know how you are. It's Sunday. It's raining outside. It's not great outside, but we're going to have a show. It's so important for us to talk about these issues and normalize these conversations as we talk about should we stay or should we leave in terms of remaining in abusive or toxic relationships, whether it's friendships, families, colleagues, or your significant other. So important for us to have this conversation. We are normalizing the conversation on mental health and well-being this morning, so join me this morning. Join me this morning. We're normalizing the conversation this morning. It's Angela Lee, and welcome to the show this morning. We're normalizing the conversation on mental health and well-being on the Spiritual and Wellbeing Show. So join me this morning and let me know how you are. And the reason why I'm actually talking about this show this morning is because I am a survivor of emotional, psychological, and financial abuse. And I am only too aware of the impact of domestic violence. And we've seen the death recently, last week, of young Archer, the young 6-year-old young boy, who was murdered by his parents. And he actually derived from an abusive household, and he was actually left unsupported, let down by the system. And so we're going to be talking about should we stay or should we leave, because as you know my story, I decided to stay in a long abusive marriage because I wanted to keep my family together, I thought. But however, I was actually doing damage. I was actually doing more harm than good without even knowing. And so that's what we're talking about this morning, because sometimes we feel that, we need to stay. We need to stay in that relationship because we want to keep the family together, which is what I thought. And, we stay and we, adhere to the abuse and we, struggle through that relationship. And it actually impacts our mindset. It impacts our mental health. It actually impacts our health, impacts our children as well. And it actually will continue the cycle of abuse if we continue to remain in that type of toxic relationship. And so that's what we're talking about this morning. It's Angela Lee. your transformational and empowerment coach this morning. So join in the conversation. I'm not sure where you are this morning. Join in the conversation this morning. Come onto the chat box and let me know how you are doing this morning. I'm just plugging it a little bit more so that we can invite people to come and have a conversation with me. Courtney, good morning to you. How are you doing, Courtney Reed? Many blessings to you. So I'm just plugging it and inviting a few people, because guess what? A lot of us are shying to talk about subjects like this, and it actually impacts on our families, our loved ones, our friends, our significant others. If we don't talk about the situation in terms of remaining or should we stay in a toxic relationship, because it does actually impact on us, and we need to talk about it, normalize it, so that if we know of anyone, any friends, any family members that we can support and give the right advice to, in light of what happened to young Arthur, good morning, who actually died by the hands of his step-parents, his stepmother and his father. He was abused. It's absolutely disastrous what happened to him. And so we probably know someone, you probably know a friend, a family member that's in a toxic relationship or a toxic friendship or a toxic family. It actually impacts on your mental health and your well-being. And as I mentioned, it's our mental health and our well-being show this morning. And we are normalizing the talk on mental health, particularly because the cases are escalating in terms of mental health. We've seen the impact during COVID-19 in terms of people that have been impacted by their well-being and mental health. And so I am normalizing the conversation this morning because you know my story. I'm a survivor of mental and psychological and also financial abuse. And that's why I'm talking about it, because I want to shed awareness. I want to help people to break the cycle, because I know the impact. I know the impact it has had on my family. And it's actually something that we're going to talk about, that it's actually genetic. It's actually something that we've inherited through no fault of our own. However, we need to take responsibility of our lives and the information that we have learned in terms of how we can recover and how we can actually take responsibility of our lives in terms of removing ourselves from that type of toxic relationship. It's so important for us to have the conversation this morning. So let me know how you are doing this morning as I'm just plugging the show this morning. Let me know how you are doing this morning. I'm actually decided to actually sacrifice my Sunday mornings to actually raise awareness. I could be in my bed sleeping and just relaxing, which is fine. But I have decided, because of my experience, because of what I've gone through, I have decided to raise awareness in terms of spirituality, in terms of wellness, in terms of our mental health, because we need to actually raise awareness. Because as I mentioned, we have seen over the news report what has happened to a young man that we know, so well. It's all over the media. Young Arthur, he's 6 years old. It's just sad. His story is so sad, what's happened to him, young Arthur, in terms of the abuse that he's actually suffered. It's absolutely disheartening. And as many of us, perhaps we are living or we have derived from relationships through no fault of our own. No one's playing the blame game here. I mean, I'm, for one, do not blame my parents. I don't blame my parents because, it's an hereditary genetic thing. I forgive them. And it's so important for us to walk in forgiveness and to develop a type of understanding. However, it's also important for us to take responsibility of what we know, what we're aware of, and particularly if we're adults. We cannot play the blame game. So before I start, what I'm going to be doing I'm going to be doing our positive affirmations as we always do. I'm going to be doing our positive affirmations this morning as we always do, so that we can raise our vibrations this morning. We can raise our vibrations this morning. So just bear with me as I always do. I'm just plugging the show so that we can invite as many people to listen to it. We're also streaming live from Facebook Live, from StreamYard, from our YouTube channel, Angela Lee. So don't forget to press that notification button and subscribe to the channel. I'm also streaming live from Anchor. I finally sorted out the Anchor And so I will post the show on the Anchor. It's a new thing, Anchor FM. And so it will also streaming live from Anchor as well. And so join in the conversation. Courtney is joining me this morning. Put your message. Let me know how you're doing. We're talking about mental health and well-being. It's our spiritual and mental health show this morning. And I'm raising awareness because I am a survivor. I'm a survivor. I'm a life coach and I'm a survivor, and I'm raising awareness. I'm not going to remain quiet. I'm going to speak my truth, because what we realize that in abusive relationships, they want you to keep quiet. They want to silence your voice. And so I refuse to be silenced this morning. And I'm hoping that you also will join me and refuse to be silent. We are going to be talking about the things that are so concerning, particularly in our community. In our community, it's a pandemic. What's happening in our community. And as I mentioned this morning, before we start, let's do our affirmations this morning. So wherever you are listening, if you're listening on Anchor FM, if you're listening on StreamYard, if you're listening on Facebook Live, if you're listening on my YouTube channel, wherever you're listening to on the airways, let's do our positive affirmations this morning. Let's do our positive affirmations this morning. My lighting is absolutely awful. My ring light. I need to get a new ring light, but I'm sure you can see me this morning. And so the topic of the show this morning is, should we stay or should we leave? And it's actually in light of the death of 6-year-old Arthur Lambinjo Hughes, in the hand of his father and his stepmother. Victims absolutely need to ask themselves this crucial question: should we stay or should we leave? I mean, I had to ask myself that question after 20 years of marriage, in a toxic marriage. Should I stay or should you leave? It took me 20 years to leave. And the impact of staying has been enormous in terms of the impact it's cost me and my family. And so that is the vital question we're asking this morning on our spiritual and well-being show. And as I mentioned, before we start, let's do our positive affirmations, and let's take our deep breaths. Let's inhale in and exhale out. Let's do that again. Let's inhale and exhale in. We know the power of breathing. We know the power of breathing, that it does for our mental health and our well-being. It releases stress. It also releases toxic energies that no longer serves us. Let's take another inhale and exhale and exhale. Okay, and so let's do our positive affirmations this morning. Greetings to you this morning. I am worthy of love just as I am. My flaws don't make me unlovable, of deserving violence. It wasn't in my head. They just made it seem that way. I made the right decision. My home should be a haven of peace, warmth, and safety. I am a whole person. I am allowed to be kind to myself. I make a difference. I am strong and capable. I give myself the permission to live. I am resourceful and will get through this. I am strong enough to do what I need to do to get through. Other people do not determine my worth. Other people do not determine my worth. It may hurt now, but it will not hurt forever. I give myself the permission to do what I need to do to recover and healing. I choose to believe in myself. I am not a failure when I make mistakes. I am not responsible for my abuse. My abuser is. It wasn't my fault. Today, I have a choice. Today, I have a choice. Good morning, Jackie. How are you doing this morning? Good morning, Jackie. Welcome to the Angela Lee Show. As I mentioned, it's my new show based on my coaching business, Altec. You can see the new logo there on the screen. And we are streaming live on Facebook Live, StreamYard, on my YouTube channel, Angela Lee, and also on Anchor. It's actually been recorded on Anchor, and I've definitely sorted it out now. Anchor has helped me, and I will give you that link as they record it, as it's been recorded on Anchor FM as well. And so welcome to the show. And we are asking ourselves, welcome Jackie, welcome Courtney to the show. Good morning to you. And as I said, we are normalizing the talk and the discussion on our well-being and our mental health. It's a normal thing to talk about how we feel. It's a normal thing to talk about, about our thinking. It's quite normal to feel overwhelmed. It's normal to feel if we're not coping. It's normal. It's a normal thing this morning. And as I mentioned, we're normalizing the chat on our mental health, on our spiritual and well-being show this morning. We are normalizing this conversation. We need to normalize this conversation, particularly in light of the case, and I know you know the case so well, of young Arthur. Young Arthur this morning, he was a 6-year-old young man, Arthur Limjo Hughes, and he died at the hands of his father and his stepmother. He died at their hands, and the social services, the system failed this young man. I was actually troubled when I listened to the account of his abuse. It's absolutely harrowing. And as victims, we need to ask ourselves this question. They need to ask themselves this question. As a survivor, myself, I had to ask myself this question: should you stay or should you leave? And I would suggest that Arthur would have wanted us to ask this question for him as he was crying out for social services to help, because he was crying out for help, but his help fell on deaf ears in terms of the abuse that he actually encountered at the hands of his parents. And I just want to account about Arthur's parents. In Arthur's mother, particularly in 2019, she's actually a victim of domestic violence herself, Arthur's mother. And in 2019, she was an alcoholic and she was into drugs. And she actually violently killed her partner. She stabbed him with a kitchen knife 12 times, frantically. And she's actually in prison serving time. She's actually in prison serving time. And she also equally came from a troubled childhood. Now, Arthur's stepmother, she actually shows signs of borderline personality disorder. And I know that I've spoken about that disorder on the other episode that I'm doing with Anchor in terms of domestic violence and raising awareness to what's going on there. I spoke about that at length in terms of borderline personality disorder. And Arthur's stepmother shows signs of borderline personality disorder. I'm going to see if I can turn this lighting off because it's not working. I hope you can see me okay. And particularly because she was so cold and she was so calculating and she was evil in terms of how she treated her stepson, Arthur. I mean, I saw a clipping where both herself and Arthur's father was just lounging around on the settee eating and starving him. He was left to stand in the hallway by themselves while they were feasting on McDonald's and ice cream. And he was left to just stand in the hallway by himself while they were just tucking into McDonald's. Oh my God, I've seen the bruise on his body when his grandmother, one of his grandmothers, reported the incident to social services in terms of the bruises that appeared on his body, and they ignored it because when they visited Arthur's home, they put an act on and they said that everything was fine. And the social services actually concluded that he actually came from a loving home. that he was actually coming from a loving home. Arthur's stepmother, she shows signs of borderline personality disorder. She was absolutely obsessive with having a relationship with his father and felt that Arthur was actually in the way. He was actually getting her way. And her main objective was to actually get rid of Arthur, which is what she succeeded in doing. I mean, Arthur, he actually witnessed violent arguments with both his biological parents and also his stepmother. He witnessed all these violent arguments. He felt unloved and hopeless as the system actually failed him. He felt unloved and he felt helpless. Good morning to you, Marcia Cook. Good morning to you this morning. So Arthur, he felt unloved. He felt hopeless. The system failed him enormously. But his parents actually derived from an abusive background, an abusive relationship, an abusive household. His parents derived from that. And as I mentioned, Arthur Limbo Hughes's mother is currently serving life for actually killing, murdering a partner. And she came from an abusive household. And we're not making any excuses for her, because we're going to discover in the show that as adults, it's your responsibility to sort out your unfinished business of your childhood and not project your pain onto victims. It's your responsibility. No one else's responsibility but yours. Good morning, Marcia Cook. Many blessings to you. Jackie, many blessings to you. Judy Thorpe, many blessings to you. It's your responsibility as adults. You cannot play the blame game. You can't keep blaming your parents or your caregivers or your family members. You can't blame your partners. It's your responsibility. If you're an adult, it's your responsibility to take that action. And as we're asking ourselves this morning, should we leave or should we stay? We know only so much that during lockdown, we have seen a rise of DV cases, and Arthur fell victim to the system. That despite the so many warnings and the cries for help, social workers and the police and the school let him down. And particularly during the period of the lockdown where victims were actually locked down literally with their perpetrators. And I mean, I'm a teaching practitioner, and I have students that are coming from vulnerable households, and they needed to actually go to school. They needed to actually be in a safe place. And as you can imagine, as you can appreciate, young Arthur, he needed to be in that safe place. But due to lockdown, due to the coronavirus and lockdown, as a vulnerable young man, he was let down by the system and he had to stay. He was locked down into an awful abusive household where, as I mentioned, the police, social services, the schools failed him because his cries fell on deaf ears. Very important for us to talk about this morning, particularly because we have so many people in our community. We know loved ones. Good morning to you, Gaffer Blue. Many blessings to you, sir. How are you doing? We have many people in our community. We have people and family members and friends that we know that are actually struggling in toxic, abusive relationships. And they need to ask themselves a question: should you stay or should you leave? Very important question to ask yourself this morning as we are talking, as we're normalizing this chat, because it's very important to normalize this chat. Because during COVID-19, as we know, the police recorded 259,000 offences that were flagged as domestic abuse issues from the period to June 2020. And I'm sure the figures are absolutely enormous for 2021. And this represents a 7% increase from 247,000 in the same period in 2019. And that is actually an increase of 18% from 218,000 in 2018. That was actually flagged as domestic abuse related issues. And in fact, we have seen an increase, we have seen a jump over the years. And as we've mentioned, young Arthur, the 6-year-old, and there's so many young people that have died at the hands of their abusers in abusive homes, the system has failed them. But this morning, we're asking you the question, should you stay or should you leave? Should you stay or should you leave? And we're going to actually delve into the impacts of whether you're going to stay or whether you're going to leave, the impact of whether you're going to stay or whether you're going to leave. And so if you're listening to my show over the airways, Anchor FM, if you're listening over the airways on my Facebook channel, on social media, on my YouTube channel, on StreamYard, if you have any family members and friends, perhaps you need to help them to ask that question, should you leave or should you stay? Let's discuss the reasons why you should stay this morning. Why should you stay in an abusive, toxic relationship? And when we're talking about abusive and toxic relationships, we're not only talking about a personal romantic relationship, we're also talking about a toxic family relationship, a toxic friendship, a toxic, probably a work environment. But in the case of Arthur, an abusive household, a family setting, we're asking you that question this morning. Should you stay or should you leave? And so the good reasons for you to stay, if you want to take some notes this morning, then please do so, or you can actually listen to the recording again. These are the good reasons for you to stay in that abusive relationship. If you and your partner or your family member or your friend have admitted to being abusive and have begun working with a psychotherapist or starting some counseling sessions, then you should stay. Did we hear that? Are we clear about that? If you've actually made it clear to your partner or your family member or your friend that or the abuser that you will no longer tolerate abuse or any kind of mistreatment, then you should stay. If your partner or your family member or your friend seeks and continues with professional help, and sometimes you might need to end that relationship to prevent further damage to your self-esteem if they don't continue that therapy, if they don't continue that professional help. But if they're continuing that professional help, then you should stay. If your partner or your family member has a healthy relationship, and I want to describe or unpack or chunk down what that healthy relationship looks like, because some of us have the wrong perceptions of what a healthy relationship looks like. And so these are the components of a healthy relationship. There's intimacy in terms of sharing, emotional intimacy, physical intimacy. There is sharing. There is healthy sharing. There is a balance in terms of sharing. There is mutual respect. You both respect each other. You and your partner share emotional and sexual intimacy. And if it's your friendship or if it's your family member, there is emotional and there is intimate sharing. There is a sense of equal give and take in your relationship. And so if it's a relationship with your significant other, personal, if it's a relationship with your family, friends, there is a sense of equal give and take in your relationship. And so it's not one-sided where you're doing all the running, where you're doing all the chasing, there is an equal give and take. And I mentioned about equal give and take, particularly in relationships, that it's balanced. It's balanced. Equal give and take. So if I'm calling you, you're calling me. If I'm visiting you, you're visiting me. Equal give and take. That's the form. Those are the components of a healthy relationship. And when you reflect on your relationship, does it bring more joy than pain in your life? And so if you're in a relationship and it's bringing more pain in your life, then guess what? Then you shouldn't stay. You shouldn't stay. And I'm actually talking about the reasons why you should stay. That's what we're talking about this morning. The reasons why you should stay. So it brings you more joy than pain. And so if you're feeling pain and you're not feeling no joy, then you need to ask yourself that question. Should you stay or should you leave? Do you have enough good thoughts for each other? And do you wish each other well? And so are your thoughts that you have for each other, is it healthy? Do you wish your partner or your friendship well? Do you wish them good? Do you want them to receive a good outcome in life? Do you have much in common? Do you have shared hopes and shared dreams? Should you leave or should you stay? We're talking about the reasons why you should stay. If you've got something in common, if you've got shared hopes, if you've got shared dreams. Do you understand each other? Is there a level of understanding? There's no conflict in terms of assumptions and presumptions and accusations. There is a balanced understanding of each other. That's when you should stay, when you understand each other, when there's mutual respect for each other. That's the only reason why you should stay, why you should remain in that toxic relationship. So this morning, if you're listening to me over the airways, it's the Angela Lee Show, and we are normalizing the talk on our well-being and our mental health. And being in a toxic environment stunts your growth, and it actually impacts on your well-being, which is why we're talking about it today. Being in a toxic relationship, being in an unhealthy relationship, being in a relationship that is not balanced can actually impact on your well-being. And we're talking about this in light of what happened to young Arthur, that young man, that 6-year-old who died at the hands of his abusive parents. That man, his father should have left. He shouldn't have remained in that relationship because the mother is absolutely toxic and abusive and has impacted on the outcome of Arthur. That's actually resulted in death. And so some relationships, they have to end. They have to end because we cannot remain in a toxic relationship and we think that it's actually going to be healthy for our children, because it's not, because the cycle is going to continue and the impact is going to be enormous because it's going to affect generations to come. And as I mentioned, that Arthur's parents were actually, they came from an abusive background. And so they repeated the cycle of abuse. Arthur's mother was an alcoholic and she was into drugs and she actually murdered her boyfriend. So she actually was a toxic person. And I bet you if we was to delve into her life, she actually came and derived from an abusive family makeup. So it's genetic, it's hereditary. And we talked about archetypes. It's something that's been passed down from generations to come. And so if we don't take action, we're going to pass down, we're going to repeat the cycle of abuse. We're going to repeat the cycle of abuse, and it's going to continue, and it's going to impact on our children. It's going to impact on our family members. It's going to impact on their mental health. It's going to impact on their well-being if we continue in that type of relationship. So the reasons why you should leave this morning, if you're in a toxic relationship and if you're listening to me on the airways, these are the reasons why you should leave. And as I mentioned, I overstayed in my toxic marriage. 20 years, I overstayed. And as a result, I can see the impact it has had on my health, on my mental health, and on my family's mental health, because I chose to stay too long, because I thought that I was doing the right thing. I was thinking, oh God, you know what? I need, to keep my family together. But we've just touched on those reasons why you should stay. And so the reasons why you should leave. If your partner, your family member refuses to admit that they have been abusive, and so if they're living in denial and they refuse to admit that they have been abusive, then you should leave. If your partner and your family member refuses to get help for their abusive behavior, if they refuse to get help, then you should leave. You have to set boundaries, and you have to make it clear that you will not tolerate any more abuse or mistreatment if they continue. So you need to make a stand. You need to speak your truth. If your partner is being emotionally or physically or sexually abused by your partner, then obviously you need to leave. If your partner is overly controlling, domineering, critical, or rejecting you, then you need to leave. These are red flags. These are warning signs. It's not normal. If you are questioning your sanity, and the abusers are using gaslighting techniques, and as I mentioned, denying that events took place and that events occurred, and that you're actually imagining things, and accusing you of being crazy. I mean, I know that behavior so well because I lived it. Gaslighting techniques, insinuating as if you're making up events, that you're being delusionalized in terms of, or you're in some sort of illusion. That's gaslighting technique, when they are denying that events take place and that you're imagining things. And most importantly, if you start beginning to distrust yourself, if you begin to distrust yourself and your own perceptions, it's time for you to leave that relationship. You cannot remain in that relationship if you're distrusting your own perception, because your abuser's gaslighting techniques is actually impacting on you. Because the longer you stay, the more you're going to actually doubt yourself and your sanity, and the more your mental health is going to be jeopardized. And as I mentioned this morning, this is our mental health and our well-being show. And we have to normalize this chat, because we know of friends, we know of family members, we know of someone that we know that is struggling in this abusive and this toxic relationships, and knowledge is power. And as adults, we need to take responsibility of our situation. If your partner or your family member or your toxic friend does not respect or value you, devalues you, looks down on you, doesn't recognize your worth, then you need to leave that relationship. You need to leave that relationship. Let me know how you are doing this morning. Let me know how you're doing. Hope you can see me. I had to turn off my ring light because it was like gleaming. Let me know how you're doing this morning. Send me a message. Send me a message. Let me know how you are doing this morning. It's Angela Lee. We're normalizing the talk on toxic relationships that impacts on our well-being and our mental health. We're normalizing the conversation this morning because it's so important that we do so, because it impacts on our well-being and our mental health. It impacts on our mental health. And so I'm going to see you in a bit. I'm going to take a bit of a break, I think, if I can do so. And I'm going to play a little number for us, if I can do that. Let me know how you are this morning. Let me know how you
Creating
are
a website can be intimidating. Digital agencies cost a lot of money, and do it yourself.
Let me know.
I believe in open doors.
Sorry about that ad there.
I've taken off the screen.
Let me know how you are this morning. Chat with me.
I'm ready.
We're shedding light on domestic violence, particularly in light of Arthur, who was killed recently by his toxic parents. And we know people, we know family members, we know friends that are in this toxic relationship, and we need to normalize the chat because it will impact on our well-being and our mental health. It will impact on it. Let me see if this ring light's going to work this time. Oh, that's better. How are you doing this morning? How are you doing this morning? Joining the conversation. Let me know if you've experienced something similar in terms of a friendship, a family member. Let me know.
Spread your wings and prepare to fly. This is the moment.
It's the Angela Lee Show this morning.
Of your life. Go ahead and fly.
We have to fly this morning. We have to find ourselves this morning. We have to do what's best for us this morning.
I believe in open doors. I'm outside of the box. What did not demolish me simply polished me. Now the clearer I can see.
How are you doing this morning? Let me know how you are this morning. Joining the conversations. It's our mental health and our well-being show. So important for us to normalize the conversation on mental health. So important for us. I know it's an ugly subject. We don't want to talk about it. We shy about it. We shy against talking about it because some of us, we feel a sense of shame and embarrassment, but there's nothing to feel embarrassed about this morning. There's no sense of shame this morning that we should feel, because it's not our fault if we've gone through that. It's not our fault if we've been victims of it, but we need to take responsibility. We need to take responsibility and take action so that we can leave that relationship for our own well-being and for our children's well-being, because if we don't, we're going to pass it on. The cycle's going to continue. And as I mentioned, we're streaming live on Facebook Live and also on my YouTube channel, so don't forget to press that notification and subscribe. And we're also streaming on Anchor FM. We're also streaming on my Facebook page, on the Transformational Empowerment Facebook page, and Altech, my business. So don't forget to like that page as well. Don't forget to like that page as well this morning. That's what we're talking about this morning. And so if you've just joined us for the first time this morning, we're asking you this question: should you leave or should you stay? Should you leave or should you stay? And we're talking about this matter, particularly in light of this young man, Arthur Limbinjo Hughes. I hope I've pronounced his name right. Lovely 6-year-old young man who died at the hands of his parents, his father and his stepmother. And I know that Birmingham City FC had a lovely display yesterday. Whilst they were playing their game against Millwall, they acknowledged him. He was on their projector screens, and they had a minute silence. And so before we even continue this conversation this morning, let's just think about young Arthur and the many other kids that have died at the hands of their abuser. Let's just take a moment just to reflect and think about young Arthur and the many other children that are actually in this vulnerable, toxic household and are suffering. Let's just give a minute and just think about those people as we remember Arthur this morning, as we remember those young kids that are suffering at the hands of their abusers this morning. Okay. And so, as I mentioned, Arthur's parents are victims themselves of domestic violence. They did not deal with their unfinished business of their childhood. They did not deal with it. They did not get the help they needed. They did not get the therapy that they needed. And we're asking you the question this morning: should you stay or should you leave this morning? We've already gone through the reasons why you should stay and the reasons why you should leave. And remember that you are here today primarily because of the way your parents or your caretakers treated you. That's why you're here today. That's why you think the way you think. It's because of the way your parents or your caretakers actually cared for you. So don't continue the cycle of abuse by exposing your kids to the same unacceptable behavior that you grew up in. I mean, I was brought up in an abusive household myself. My mother was involved in domestic violence relationships. And she was the victim and the abuser. And when you're in that type of environment, you can actually invariably become the victim and the abuser because you would have learned those toxic behaviors. And so if your children are being physically abused by your partner, as we've got ourselves involved in relationships where we've invited these partners like Arthur's family into our homes, and your partner is actually toxic, your partner is actually abusive, then it's vital that you get your children away from him. It's extremely vital that you get your children away from him. I mean, you can actually send your children or to live with someone else until your partner gets help, or unless you show your good children in terms of that type of solution, then your kids will never forgive you. They will never forgive the impact and the harm of that relationship. And you, in fact, will not even forgive yourself. You need to reach out to a therapist and you need to break that cycle of abuse this morning. And so if your children are witnessing abuse, you might actually be saying to yourself that, you know what, I'm in a relationship. It's not 100%. It's not great. But, my partner or my family member, they're not physical with my kids. But if your kids are witnessing abuse, then they are more likely to feel insecure and frightened and off balance. It actually impacts on their mental health. I mean, I'm a teacher, as you know, as well as a coach, and I've seen the impact in terms of my students that I teach, in terms of the adverse abusive experience that they've had in their childhood. I've seen the impact when I teach them on a daily basis. I see that impact. And so you are you're creating an atmosphere of insecurity. You're causing your kids to be frightened and off balance if you continue to stay in that abusive household, because your children witnessing it is as bad as them actually receiving that physical punishment, that physical abuse. Your kids may perhaps feel humiliated or inadequate. Older kids tend to pick up on this disrespectful behavior and attitude by one of the other parents, and they feel they have to take sides. I've been there. I'm talking from experience. And they will either feel anger or hatred towards one of the parents. Who is being abusive, or they will lose respect for that abusive parent, and they begin to mimic that abusive parent. If you allow to remain in that toxic relationship and your kids are actually witnessing it, then they will inherit, they will model that behavior. They will become angry. They'll become angry kids. And I've seen angry kids at many establishments that I've taught at, even within my school. There's many angry young people. They will have this hatred towards their parents. And as I mentioned, they will inevitably pick up and model that abusive behavior. They will mimic that behavior, and they will in turn repeat that cycle in their relationships that they have when they become adults. And that's how the cycle continues. The longer the emotional abuse continues in your relationship, the more your kids are actually going to be affected by it. So the longer you continue in that abusive relationship, it's the longer, or it's the more impact it's going to have on your kids. And so you can't be selfish like Arthur's parents were, that remained in that toxic relationship that ended in death. You've got to think about your kids. And I know it's difficult because some of us, we don't even believe we're in a toxic relationship. We don't believe we're in a toxic partnership or in toxic marriage. I mean, I didn't believe it. I thought, oh, this was like a normal behavior. But it's abnormal. It's not normal to reject or isolate or emotionally abuse or mistreat someone. If it's emotional abuse, it's not normal. It's not healthy. If there's no intimacy, if there's no equal give and take, if there's no reciprocity in terms of respect, it's not normal. And so we should not remain or continue in that relationship. And I know it's sort of difficult sometimes because some of us, we are women and we're single and we're thinking that, oh my God, my biological clock is ticking and I need to have kids, or I need to stay in this relationship because I don't want to feel alone, or I'm lonely, or I feel a sense of isolation. But you're impacting on your kids. You're impacting on not only your kids, you are also equally impacting on your mental health and your well-being, and also on the impact of your kids' well-being and their mental health. And you are allowing that cycle to be repeated the longer you remain in that relationship. And not only will they be damaged by witnessing that abusive behavior, but they will be you're providing them literally with a poor role model. And you're setting them up to be either victims or abusers. So I want us to actually ask ourselves this question, for those that are listening on the airways, on Anchor FM, on my YouTube channel, on my social media platforms. If you're listening this morning, ask yourself this question: should you leave or should you stay? Because the longer, excuse me, the longer you stay, the longer you remain, the longer the relationship continues, the more it's going to impact on your kids. And you're setting them up to be either victims or abusers. And I'm talking from experience, believe me. There are many kids who become bullies or victims of bullies in schools. And I've seen that in schools. They witness emotional and physical abuse in their homes. Most kids that are victims of bullies or become bullies, they have invariably witnessed emotional and physical abuse in their homes. So unless you or your partner or your member are seeking or working with a professional therapist, then you are sacrificing the emotional health of your kids by choosing to stay together. And as I mentioned, I made that mistake. I chose to stay 20 years in a toxic relationship, in a toxic marriage, thinking that I want to keep my family together and not knowing that I'm actually impacting on my family's well-being and my well-being, that I'm actually impacting on my kids' mental health and their well-being. because I thought I was delusionized. I thought that I was, I was keeping them together, that I was keeping my family together. But in fact, I was doing more harm than good. And I'm not ashamed to actually share that with you, because I bear no blame, because at the time I was not aware that I was in a domestic violence, emotional abusive marriage. I wasn't aware. I thought it was normal to be given the silent treatment, normal to be rejected. I thought it was just a normal thing. People have their off days, I assumed. But it's not normal. It is not normal. If he hits you and shoves you and pushes you, then these are clear danger signs that the abuser has actually lost control. So don't fool yourself. And if he has already become violent to you once, then he will do it again. If he's already slapped you once, he will slap you again. Don't accept their feeble excuse that they have emotional problems, because that might actually invariably be the case. However, they need to take responsibility of their behavior by seeking the professional help that they need. And I remembered years ago, a friend of mine was in a abusive marriage where her husband would break the plates. When she did something wrong, he would go down in the kitchen and he'll break all the crockery, and he will shout and he will be in a rage. And all the kids will witness that. All her kids will witness that. And they lived in fear. They walked on eggshells. And then when he's finished and when he's calmed down, he'd expect his wife to clear up after him. That's not normal behavior. And I remember distinctively that it came to a point where they had a fight, and the outcome was awful, that she actually ended up in hospital. And this is a real story. She ended up in hospital, and the doctors actually said to her that you're so lucky that the glass that actually cut her hand, if it had just cut her nerve, she would have actually lost her life. And so she was actually lucky to be alive. And this is a long-time friend of mine. She was in an abusive marriage. She was living in fear. But she felt that she had to keep it together because she had young kids and she wanted them to have a father figure in the home, no matter what that looks like. And he was busy smashing up the plates, and he will be driving erratically, and he'll be shouting and devaluing her. And she nearly lost her life. And I was absolutely horrified. I was shocked. I was disturbed when I heard that she actually went back to him. She had left him and she went back. She returned to that relationship. And so I can only comprehend what her kids actually look like now, because they will actually either be victims of abuse or they will become abusers themselves. And so when you remain in these relationships, you are setting up your kids to become either the victim or the abuser. We all have come from maybe troubled households and troubled families, and we're not to blame. However, you need to take responsibility of your behavior. So if you're lashing out at your partner, if you're lashing out at your family, if you've got erratic behavior, if you're out of control, then you need to take responsibility of your behavior, not play the blame game, and seek professional help. If your partner and your family member if they refuse to seek professional help, then my advice to you is to actually detach from them until they do. Otherwise, the longer, every day you stay in that relationship, you're actually endangering your emotional and your physical well-being, or possibly your life. And as I mentioned, my friend, she nearly lost her life. Arthur lost his life. And there's many kids that have lost their lives. There's many women that have lost their lives. There's many men that have lost their lives to domestic violence. And so the longer you stay, the longer you remain, you're endangering your emotional and your physical health and possibly your life. So this morning, we are actually shedding light. We're actually normalizing the talk on mental health, on our well-being, on our spiritual health, on our physical health. It's a conversation that we have to have. It's a conversation that is so important. And it's a conversation that many of us shy away from. We don't want to talk about it. And we wonder why relationships don't work. And we wonder why we attract the same type of person, because we're on this karmic wheel of repeat. And if we don't recover, we're going to repeat. We wonder why. Oh, I don't know why I attract the same man all the time. Oh, you know, Bob reminds me of Bill, or Bill reminds me of Winston, and Winston reminds me of John. It's the same person, but same person with the same characteristics. You're on a karmic cycle. And it will continue, it will prolong until you seek professional help. And there's so much help that you can actually get out there. So much help. One of the most important and one of the crucial points in terms of recovering from an adverse family experience is actually trust and forgiveness. Trust and forgiveness. You must trust and forgive yourself first. And you must do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. You equally have to forgive your abuser if you can. Because if you refuse to do that, if you forgive yourself first, if you fail to forgive your abuser, then you're going to have anger and resentment, and it's going to make it really important. It's going to be a struggle for you to actually, it's going to be literally impossible for you to move forward in your life, because you're going to have so much anger and resentment in you. So it's so important for you to forgive yourself first, do what you need to do to take care of yourself, and to forgive the abuser. It's good to have an understanding of the abuser. I mean, my ex-husband, as I mentioned before on so many shows, he was abused when he was a child. Many ex-partners were abused in their childhood, and I attracted them because I didn't deal with my unfinished business of my childhood. So I was repeatedly attracting the same type of males into my life, into my romantic life, because at the time I did not deal with my adverse childhood. I did not deal with the unfinished business of my childhood. And so if we don't deal with that, if we don't confront it, if we don't get the professional help that we need in order to unpack that, then we're going to be continuously on this karmic cycle, repeating year in, year out, 10 years on, 30 years on, perhaps in many cases 40 years on, all people's lives attracting the same type of men or the same type of female into your life. It's going to continue. It's going to be like a roller coaster. So forgiveness or forgiving is actually different from forgetting, because we can never forget. I mean, I can never forget. I can never forget my experiences, and I will never forget. And you will never forget how your abuser has treated you, and you should not forget. Particularly as not forgetting will keep you on your toes. It will keep you vigilant. It will strengthen your resolve to ensure that you're not going to let that happen again. And I don't believe in the notion of forgiving and forgetting. I believe in forgiving, but not forgetting. Because you can't forget. You will always remember. Your body keeps scores. You will always remember. And it serves you to remember. It serves you not to forget, so that you will not repeat the same mistake. And so survivors need to forgive themselves for allowing the abuse to continue. And there is also a need for you to not live a life of guilt and continue to chastise yourself for being passive or weak or foolish because you put up with that abuse, or because you endured that toxic marriage or that toxic relationship. So there's no need for you to live a life of guilt, and there's no need for your adult kids, if you have them, and if they have been affected by abuse, There's no need for them to actually hold you prisoner to guilt because of the choices that you made in that relationship, because you are not to blame, because you put up with that abuse because you were a neglected child. That's why you stayed. So no one should chastise you. You shouldn't chastise yourself. You shouldn't hold yourself hostage. No one should imprison you. No one should project that guilt or that blame on yourself because you stayed. You put up with that abuse because you were a neglected child. You came from abusive childhood yourself. However, you now have to take responsibility. You now have to take action. You now need to do the inner work. You now need to do the shadow work. You now need to reach out for that help. You now need to reach out for that help. You need to reach out for that professional help to ensure that you do not repeat the lesson of your past. So it's repeat or recover. Repeat or recover. I'm asking yourself this morning, should you stay or should you leave? Should you stay or should you leave? Ask yourself the question this morning as we're talking about our well-being on our mental health, because no matter what you do, no matter what choices you decide to do, it's going to impact on your mental health and the mental health of your loved ones. So we need to ask ourselves the question this morning: should we leave or should we stay? This morning. Should we leave or should
say I'm not enough?
Should we leave or should we stay?
Every single lie that tells me I will never measure up.
Ask yourself the question this morning:
am I more than just the sum of every high and every
do whatever you need to do to get the help and reach out to get that professional help that you need. Do that. You could reach out to me. I'm a life coach. On my socials, reach out if you need that support this morning. Reach out this morning. Break the cycle. Get off that karmic wheel this morning. Get off it and get the help that you need, because as an adult, you're responsible for that help. You're responsible. You can't play the blame game. You're responsible for getting that help, for reaching out for that professional help. You're responsible. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to be treated with respect. You deserve that this morning. You're a valuable person. You deserve a good life. You deserve to be loved. You deserve a relationship that is healthy. Equal give and take. You deserve that this morning. So don't deny yourself that right.
Taking all I have and now I'm laying it at your feet.
You deserve to be loved this morning. It's Angela Lee on the Angela Lee Show. Now, before I end the show this morning, we're finishing at 11:30 or just before 11:30. Just want to share a couple of books that might help you recover, because not only can you reach out to therapists and counselors or coaches for support, but particularly to do with the topic that we're dealing with, you definitely need a professional therapist and a counselor that can actually help you on your journey of recovery, most definitely. And so there's a couple of books that I want to share with you that has helped me on my journey. And so the first book I want to share with you, there's a book here and it's called The Emotional Abusive Relationship. You can actually get it on Amazon by Beverly Eagle, and that would actually help you to get over emotional abusive relationships. It actually goes into real details about what that looks like and why people abuse and being abused, and we've already discussed that this morning. There's also another book that you can get. It's called Codependent No More by Melody Beattie, and it also talks about these behaviors that we've inherited because of our toxic environment. So we become codependent, dependent on the other, and it deals with lots of things in terms of low self-worth and low self-esteem and toxic relationship. You can also get this book. It's called Learning to Love Yourself, and it's also on Amazon by Sharon Wexley Cruz, and that tells you about self-love. Hello, Jennifer Jackman. I've said your name properly this morning. And that talks about self-love, how you love yourself. And I've actually got a book on Amazon. It's called Finally in Love with Yourself. I'll put the link on the channel. And that's also my journey in terms of, falling in love with myself, learning to love with myself, particularly through my journey, as you know so well. And so that book is also available on Amazon, Learning to Finally in Love with Yourself. I'm going to put that link on the show in a minute. And also there is also another book, Honor Yourself. This is a book by it's Self-Esteem and Personal Transformation by Nathaniel Brandon. It's an excellent book, and it talks about the importance of putting yourself first, of loving yourself. It talks about being conscious and aware of self and being present and putting yourself first. And it's okay to be selfish. It's okay to love yourself. It's okay to say no. Honoring yourself, honoring your feelings, being aware of your feelings, honoring yourself. It's an excellent book. And as you know, I'm still, I continue to read it. And there's another book that I'm reading currently, and it's called The Body Keeps Scores. And it's mind, body, and soul, and it's a transformation of trauma. And so if you're going through trauma, if you've gone through trauma and experiencing trauma, this is an excellent book. It's by Belzy van der Kolk. And he talks about how, because of the things that we've suffered in our childhood, in our environment, our body keeps scores of that. And so there's so many resources online. There's so many resources. There's so many, there's domestic violence line that you can actually ring up. There's the Samaritans, and there's lots of domestic violence channels that you can reach out to. And I'll try and put a couple on there. There's lots of resources. There's also a talk therapy that you can actually talk to someone. So if you're a bit shy, you don't want to see someone face to face, you can actually do talk therapy where you can talk to someone. There's young minds that you can talk to, and adult minds that you can talk to in terms of your mental health and your well-being. There's so many resources out there. You can reach out to myself. I'm a life coach. You can reach out to, so many people out there that actually want to help. And so don't be, unfortunately, young Arthur, he tried to reach out. He was a young boy, as we mentioned. He died at the age of 6 because at the hands of his parents. And he was trying to reach out, and the systems failed him. So this morning, reach out. If you need help, reach out. There's nothing to be ashamed about. You can't blame yourself for being in a toxic relationship. You can't blame yourself because you stayed because of your neglect that you went through in your childhood. That's the reason why you stayed. Good morning, Curly. How are you doing? That's the reason why you stayed. And so don't blame yourself this morning. Don't blame yourself. Don't beat yourself up. But what you can do is take proactive action, take responsibility, because now that you're an adult, you're no longer a child, you have to take responsibility. It's your responsibility to take action, to seek help, to reach out for the support that you need in order to recover, so that you don't repeat the traumas, so that you don't repeat the genetical traumas that we've inherited by our parents, by our ancestors. We can free ourselves. I've managed to free myself. So it's possible. There is a possible, there is a possible outcome. You don't have to remain in that toxic relationship. You don't have to remain a victim. I'm not a victim anymore. I'm a survivor. And so this morning, I'm talking about us as individuals taking responsibility of our own personal development. And particularly as we're nearing the end of the year, I'm sure we don't want to have a repeat of the same toxic behavior, of the same people that we're attracting systematically in our lives. It's up to us to take action and to take that proactive action for change in our lives. I mean, I did it, anyone can do it. And so thank you for joining me on the show this morning. Many blessings to you this morning. And if you've missed the show, then you can actually listen to the replay. I'll send you the link on Anchor FM. I'll also send you the link for the show on my social medias. It's been streamed live. I want to say many blessings and thanks for Jackie Name, Judy, Marcia, Gaffer Blue, and Jennifer Jackman, and also Curly Watts just joined me for the last session, for joining me. If you've missed the replay, you can do replay again. Also, it's actually been streamed on my YouTube channel, Angela Lee. So feel free to press that notification button and subscribe to my channel, because I'm here to support and help you. Have a great Sunday. Have a fantastic Sunday. I'm going to have a great Sunday, and be good to yourself and take care. See you later.